This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 545 for January 25th, 2018. Coming up on today's show, Kevin Patterson's new book, Love's Not Colorblind. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx, and we do have a fun interview with one of our favorite co-hosts and brand new book author, Kevin Patterson, coming up a little later in the show. But first, I want to welcome back all our faithful listeners and to welcome to our new listeners. If you're listening for the first time, maybe you're one of our new Spotify listeners. I see that last month we added about 2,000 new downloads thanks to Spotify. So welcome to our new Spotify listeners or anyone else that is just now discovering Polyweekly for the first time. And if you are new to the show, you might not know that we typically start out our episodes with a couple of announcements, things that are going on in my life or in the poly world in general. And the very first one is about the Solo Poly Unconference that's happening right here in Seattle in April.
Have you heard?
No, what?
There's a Solo Polyamory Unconference coming up in Seattle, Washington, USA in April 2018. You can use the hashtag SOPOCO18 to find it on Facebook.
What's going to happen during this conference?
No, it's an unconference.
Wait, what's an unconference?
It's less formal than a conference and led by the attendees.
Well, why not just have a regular conference?
Because unconferences are especially good for peer-to-peer learning, collaboration, creativity, and increased engagement because participants provide the themes.
What kind of themes?
Well, some of the amazing sessions held last year include comets in long-distance relationships, creating community, and developing solo resilience. We have some great new ideas this year, too, including navigating couple privilege, solo poly for introverts, solo poly for extroverts, and navigating entwined relationships, or as I like to call it, gently uncoupling.
Where can I buy tickets?
Search hashtag SOPOCO18 on Facebook to find the official event page and a link to the Eventbrite.
That's hashtag SOPOCO18.
Can't wait to see you there.
You know what? Even though I'm not technically solo poly anymore, that's so happening so close to me that I might just have to pop in and see what's going on. And I'll provide a link to the Facebook event where you can buy tickets in our show notes, which will be on your podcast app if you're listening through an app or on our show notes at polyweekly.com. Next announcement, we're going to pay some bills with our sponsor.
Are you planning on opening up your relationship? The University of Utah Relationship Decisions Lab is looking for participants in monogamous relationships who are currently considering opening up their relationship to take a survey. We are looking for individuals who have never opened up and individuals who have opened up in the past but are currently with one partner and are planning on opening up again. This study will examine how people choose to open their relationships and what their experiences of this relationship transition look like. If you or anyone you know fits our qualifications, we invite you to take our survey. You can find our survey at www.relationshipdecisions.org. Once there, click on the Participants tab and then on the Open Relationship Project link. Not only will you be furthering science, but you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Again, the link is www.relationshipdecisions.org. Click on the Participants tab and the Open Relationship Project link.
If you can help out with that survey, please do. Now, I'm not doing an official Poly in the News segment today because basically I can't wait to get to the interview with Kevin Patterson. Louise on Facebook sent me a link to one of Lush's new bath products. Now, if you're not familiar with Lush, they make these fantastic, kind of pricey, homemade bath products. And Louise sent me a link to this new one, which is called Polyamorous. Is this love that I'm feeling? It is basically a bath bomb that you throw in the bath and then it fizzes and it, I guess, turns into these little romantic looking pink plumes and it's got shea butter and everything like that. But I thought that's just another sign that polyamory is making it into the media once more. In fact, this is another example of a retailer using polyamory to sell something. Kind of fun. I am thrilled to have with me back in the studio Kevin Patterson. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much again for having me on.
Always a pleasure to have you on. And this time it's for an even more special reason than just co-hosting. You have a book out.
Yeah. I mean, not out, but like soon to be out, like out and out everywhere.
Yes. So quick introduction for those who may be tuning in for the first time. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do in the poly community.
All right. Well, my name is Kevin Patterson. I have been an active member of the Philadelphia local community for a few years. I've been ethically non-monogamous for about 15 years. And what I'm, I guess, best known for is I run a blog called Poly Role Models, and Poly Role Models is basically an interview series. It highlights the diversity of polyamory, like both the diversity in relationship structures and the diversity in the people who inhabit these relationship structures. That's available on Tumblr, and it showcases, is probably the most diverse and inclusive showcase of polyamory available anywhere.
That is definitely true. How long have you been doing Poly Role Models? It's been a while.
Yeah, Poly Role Models it's now in its third year, and I believe you were like one of the first 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. I think either someone reached out to me or maybe you did and said, oh, you should be on this Poly Role Models thing. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it was young when I started, but I thought it had already been going for a year or so.
No,
Wow.
you were within the first. I mean, it's a weekly series, and you were within the first 2 months.
Oh, that's so exciting. Oh. So let's talk about your book. I'm so excited. The book is called Love's Not Colorblind: Race and Representation in Polyamorous and Other Alternative Communities. So let's start with what I ask all authors. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, it seemed that when I started doing Poly Role Models, a lot of it was about representation. And, polyamory gets represented sort of a certain way, a really limited sort of way. So when I did the blog, I wanted to show more. I wanted to show more than just white folks. I mean, the blog's got white folks, but it's more than just white folks. The blog has cisgender people, but it's more than just cisgender people. It's more than just, skinny, well-to-do, neurotypical people without disabilities. Polyamory looks like everybody. So I wanted a blog that looked like everybody, and I think I've done a pretty decent job of showcasing that. I always feel like I can do better, but I mean, everyone can always do better at everything. But, when I started doing that, it was suggested to me by Rebecca Hiles, the Frisky Fairy, who I credit endlessly.
Oh, she's amazing.
She is. She made the suggestion that I take all these conversations that I have about representation and polyamory and turn it into a workshop. And I've been delivering that workshop. Like, I started at Poly Living Philadelphia and CatalystCon Midwest, but I've been able to spin that all over the country. And it seemed like a workshop that sort of met its audience at the right place. And the audience was prepared to meet me when I was prepared to deliver the workshop. And because I don't know if I seriously doubt I'm the first person talking about race and polyamory, but for some reason, like, it caught on when I started doing it. And there's any number of reasons why that could be. But I reached out to my publisher, Thorntree Press, and I said, hey, I want to write a book. And I gave them some other idea. And they immediately said, that idea is cool, but we've been hearing about this race and polyamory workshop that you've been talking about. And so that became the thing. I decided to put that out into the world because, I mean, as much as I've been all over the country these last couple of years, I can't be everywhere all the time. And this is information that can be useful, not just in polyamorous communities, but in kink communities, swing communities, completely unrelated communities.
So how practical is the information in this book? Is it a how-to?
Some of it ends up being a how-to. When I wrote this, I didn't expect it to be it wasn't that I didn't expect it to be practical. It was that I didn't expect myself to be using it. Like I wrote a lot of information that I thought was going to be useful, but I didn't expect to be the one sort of making it happen. And not too long after I was like sort of closing out the book or having just finished the first draft of the book, I ended up getting elected to leadership of my local community. And, it was part of a leadership team. It was like, it's 5 of us. What ended up happening is together, a few of us were able to sort of push forward a lot of the initiatives that we used in the book. Like we spent a lot of time trying to center marginalized voices in a way that we hadn't done before. Just having a change in leadership and just having people of color like actively involved in leadership where that hadn't been a thing before. We've really made changes now where I've said this to the people in my local community. If I started polyamory in that community today, I would not be able to write this book the way that I did. That is a brand new thing where I spent like 2 years being the token black guy or one of very few token black guys in my local community. That doesn't really happen anymore. Our events are full of people of color. They're harder to count. I can't just walk into a bar for a polyamorous happy hour and like casually glance and say, all right, well, there's 4 of us here. There's 3 of us here. There's 6 of us here. Oh, that's
awesome.
It's not as easy to do that now as it was before. And we've made really major strides that way. So it feels weird to say that like it backs up and proves that, the stuff that I put in the book is stuff that works, because obviously it wasn't just me. It wasn't, just stuff that we put in the books. We didn't just do outreach for people of color. We tried to do better. We tried to do better for people of a variety of marginalizations, but all of that has made vast strides in our local community. So it makes me more confident in the things that I say and how practical the information that I speak about, the information that's in the book, can be applied to, basically any community.
Mm-hmm. So what is the genre of this book? Is it a personal memoir? Is it instruction? Is it research-based?
It's a little bit of everything. When I give my workshop, I speak a lot from my personal experiences. There are times when, something's happened to me at an event, or I felt some sort of way. I felt unwelcome for whatever reason. And I start talking about that, sort of telling my stories, and the people who attend, they'll tell their stories. Sometimes it's a good story about how a time that sort of thing went right. Sometimes it's a bad story about the time they felt unwelcome, and other times it's a story about how they made someone feel unwelcome and didn't realize it until they showed up to my workshop and found out that what they did was a bad move. So like there's a lot of personal stories in there. And this time I decided to, with the book, I decided to not just include my own stories, but I also go into a lot of research. I bring up academic studies whenever I can. I bring up a lot of pop culture references whenever I can. I say it really early in the book. It's not a polyamory book. It's a sociology book with polyamory as its focus.
I like that. I can't wait to read it. I do actually have a galley copy. It's not officially out yet, but Thorntree Press was kind enough to send me one. And we've actually been leafing through it, but I haven't read the whole thing. Who is this book for? Is this for community organizers? Is it for community participants? Is it frankly something for white people? Or is it for, everybody?
I try to make it a book for everybody where since it's all based off of the same workshop that I've been giving all over the place, what I learned that a lot of our community organizers are white folks who don't realize why they don't have people of color attending their events. This book is for them. Like I try to give really practical advice on how to change your demographic, how to create a more inclusive environment. It's also for people of color who have felt unwelcome. one of the most affirming experiences when I speak anywhere is head nods from people, where I'm telling somebody my story and I'm saying like, hey, this is about a time I went to a party and this is a thing that happened, and there's people there nodding their heads because because it happened to them. You know, for a number of years, like, I was one of very few people in the Philadelphia community, very few people of color who would show up to events on a regular basis. You know, I'd go to an event, it would be like me and two other people. And sometimes those two other people were like me and my wife and her boyfriend, you know?
Oh dear.
And that would happen enough times. And I would say that in some other state on the other side of the country. And there are people there who understood that because it's something that's been happening to them for the last however many years. So it's for people who need to hear their experiences validated, for people who need to try to understand how to make their communities more inclusive, and also for people who feel like, I don't want to create an inclusive community. I want a intentional community of people of color to do their own thing on the other side of town. It's for them as well. And there's a lot of room for people to sort of take from it what you will and make from it what you get.
What is something that surprised you as you were writing this book? What did you learn?
What I learned is how few of us are really talking about this. That was really stunning to me. Like, when I started writing this workshop, I really expected to run into a bunch of people immediately talking about the same things. But I would go to like sex ed conferences and find myself the only person talking about polyamory, or I'd go to a polyamory conference and find myself to be the only person talking about race. And it wasn't until Dallas Millennium did I run into other presenters where we had like significant overlap in our topics, where like I was speaking about, like, my workshop is the intersection of race and polyamory. And I ran into Christopher Smith, who was doing polyamory in the Black American. And I ran into Alicia Bunyan Sampson, who does the blog, Diary of a Polyamorous Black Girl. She had a workshop about like polyamory and white supremacy. And like, it wasn't a complete overlap. There was a Venn diagram and there was a lot of mix and match there, even though we had 3 different workshops going in 3 different directions, but there was a lot of similar content in all 3. And that was the first time that's ever happened. I don't know when that's going to happen again before the next Poly Dallas Millennium.
It is an exceptional conference, and just a little side plug here for Poly Dallas Millennium, which is a poly conference that does intentionally center people of color, but of course people of all ilks are welcome.
Yes.
And that was the first instance for me for that as well, I will say. I think I can safely say that, yes, until recently, you were the only speaker I ever saw speaking about inclusion and diversity in the poly community. Maybe one other, but not a lot. Maybe one at each event, if we're lucky, not 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I've got a bigger platform and I've got a wider range than I really expected to have. And even then, it was still so limited because in a lot of cases, it ended up being like just me. That was a bit of a shock. And I say it all the time, where when I started writing this book, I tried to finish it as quickly as I could because I was expecting to hear about 2 or 3 other similar books that were headed to market, and I had to beat them all to market. And then once I started talking to people and getting to know folks who were doing like similar work or work within the same sphere of influence, and I realized like, no, my book is the book right now. My book is going to be the book. So I can slow down, take my time, make sure that I get everything that I want to get into the book, which of course I couldn't, because the funny thing about speaking about race and oppression and entitlement and privilege is that you never run out of content. Where I wrote the first draft and then that movie Get Out came out and I had to rewrite a chapter. And then back in, I think, March or May, I was in the New York Times Magazine. There was a New York Times Magazine article that my wife and I were quote unquote featured in. And I had to rewrite a chapter because of that, because of how badly we were tokenized by that experience. So between right now and when the book actually releases on March 30th, there's going to be something else that I experienced that I wish I could have put in that book.
What are people going to learn from reading your book? What are they going to walk away knowing?
For people of color, I hope that they take away that they are not alone in feeling the way they feel. If they feel unwelcome in some of these community spaces, if they feel like the outreach or the support isn't quite there, like the resources aren't quite for them. I'm hoping they take away that they're not by themselves in feeling that way, because a lot of times if you're in a space that's not really created for you or doesn't really center you, it's really easy to think, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm wrong. And you're going to be surrounded by people who tell you that sometimes as well. And in that case, I hope that white folks get from the book, this is what's going on. This is why that black guy who showed up to your event didn't show up the next week and never showed up again. You know, hopefully they get a better understanding of what creating inclusive spaces really means, what kind of effort and work really needs to get put into that sort of thing. Because, you know, everyone says, well, everyone's welcome. You know, we don't bar anyone at the door, and they think that's enough. And a lot of times that isn't. Most times that isn't. And people need to understand why that isn't if they're going to make a change, you know, because if you've got a polyamory, like a monthly meetup, and it is 100% white 100% of the time, there's a reason for that. You might not be barring people at the door, but there's a reason for that. Like, it's not a coincidence, so it can't be a coincidence when you change it.
Yeah, and I will admit that I have been guilty of that myself in thinking, well, everybody's welcome, everybody knows they're welcome, what's the big deal? And, you know, thanks to educators like you and some others along the way, I really came to realize how, you know, just like when somebody first come out as poly, they can feel, it can be very lonely and isolating, and they could feel marginalized, like they're the only one and they're weird, and there are a lot of emotions that can go along with that. You know, the same thing is true in our poly meetups. If we don't make them open to everybody, if we don't actively embrace and actively reach out to the types of communities that we want to serve, well, then, you know, we're going to get a bunch of middle-class white folks, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, and it's not always everyone's fault, you know, but you have to know what's going on. You can't just assume that it's not on you, especially if you're someone like an organizer, if you're someone who coordinates parties, who coordinates events. There's more going on there, and you should at least be made aware of that if it's something that's of concern to you.
Exactly. I don't say that to mean refer to fault or blame, which is not particularly helpful, but simply that those of us who have a platform, whether it be a podcast or a blog or a community meetup, I feel that we do have a responsibility to be as inclusive and compassionate and tolerant as the current administration isn't. So
oh God, yeah.
I think that's something where we can really make a difference in people's lives, just my 2 cents. So your book is coming out March 30th,
yes.
And you are going on tour, my friend.
Oh, goodness.
Where are you? Where are you going to be? How can we find you? Where can we buy our tickets?
All right. Well, let me start by saying that if you go to the Poly Role Models page on Facebook, I've got event pages set up for everywhere that I'm going to be. As far as conferences, I'm going to be at Poly Living Philadelphia in February, Playground Conference in Toronto in February, Southwest Love Fest. I've got CatalystCon, Poly Dallas Millennium. I've also got like just tour stops where it's just me talking about the book, signing the book, talking about the book. Hopefully I can have conversations with everyone listening about the book. That's going to be New York, Philadelphia, the DC area. And I've actually got a bunch of stops right around the corner from you there, Minx. I'm going to be I'm going to be in Portland, Olympia, Washington, Seattle, Vancouver. I'm making the rounds.
I am so excited. We cannot wait to host you here. The Pacific Northwest loves you, and I'm sure we will love your book.
The other thing I want to say is that those are the dates that I currently have. Right now, I've got an IndieGoGo / Generosity crowdsourcing page that's set up where you can actually pay for early copies of the book and also to support the book tour. So the more I'm actually able to put in from the book tour, the more places I'd like to go. Like I'd like to be able to spend more time out in the Southwest. I'd like to be able to make a bigger, longer trip to California. Atlanta is calling my name.
Oh, yes.
So I want to be able to make more stops on this book tour. I want to be able to do it really big this year. And if supporting that is within anybody's best interest, supporting it and also getting early copies of the book. Yeah, if you Google Love's Not Colorblind book tour, that should be one of the first pages to show up. There's also a bunch of links on the Poly Role Models Tumblr and the Poly Role Models Facebook page.
Now, I'm so happy you have so many dates already on your book tour, and I'm so excited you're coming to the Pacific Northwest. Now, listen up, listeners. So for those who may not be fortunate enough to live in one of the cities on your book tour, we are setting up a contest to give away a copy of the book, Love's Not Colorblind, Race and Representation in Polyamorous and Other Alternative Communities. All right, here's what you do. So if you go to the Poly Role Models Facebook page, there is a pinned post at the top, and I'll provide a link in the show notes so you can click to it directly. The link is the Love's Not Colorblind book tour. And if you click on that link and then click the share button and share it to your timeline, and you can type whatever you want in the comment box. So you can basically, you just need to say something. You don't have to say something nice. You just have to click share, write your own 2 cents in, and then share that post on your wall.
Yeah. Now you've got to share it as a public post so that I'm able to take a look at it and, make sure that you've actually shared it. And to make it even clearer, the post has a Tribe Called Quest reference. It says, "We're on a award tour with Kevin, your man, going each and every place with a book in my hand."
That is the post. And again, I'll put a link to it in the show notes so you can just click through directly. Super easy. And when you share with your own commentary, you will be entered to win a copy of the book. And we are going to do that drawing on February 10th. So you have a couple of weeks to do that. And that way, one lucky winner will get an advance copy of this awesome book coming out. So exciting. And you heard it here on Poly Weekly because we know Kevin, and Kevin is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Kevin, thanks again for joining us. I'm so excited about you and about your book. I think we've already mentioned this, but if anybody wants to find out more about you or your book, where are the best places to go for that?
Best places to go are the Poly Role Models page on Facebook. I'm also Poly Role Models on Twitter. Feel free to get at me, ask me questions. I'm Poly Role Models on Tumblr and Instagram as well.
Fantastic. Kevin, thanks so much for everything you do. And thanks for coming here to talk with us about everything that you do. It's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to be a part of this. And thank you so much for the consideration.
And thanks again to Kevin for taking the time to chat with us. It is always a pleasure. And I'm personally so excited that his book is coming out so soon and that we'll be able to see him here in Seattle. Our feedback this week is a response to one of our STI episodes, number 517, about the dangers of herpes.
Hi, I was just listening to episode 517, and I'm a little concerned at the way the STIs were rated, especially in regards to herpes. It was rated as a garter snake that can bite you, but it's not going to cause you any serious harm. It was mentioned in the rare case of pregnancies, which is very true. But there is an instance where 1 in 10,000 HSV carriers, if they have a sunburn at an outbreak, they could actually develop viral meningitis. And I know this for a fact because it happened to my ex-husband after his very first outbreak. The viral meningitis kept him in the hospital for a total of a month while he received cyclovir, 750 cc's a day to try and clear the meningitis. He also had a full-blown encephalitis as well. While not as common as just having a normal outbreak, a lot of people aren't aware that there are dangers to herpes. And I kind of felt that the presenter, she gave a general gloss over, and while I don't want people to have the stigma of, oh my God, I have herpes, it's a death sentence, so it's horrible. I think there is more shame to it. I also think that there's a lot of unknown facts about it, and I felt that the rating given to HSV made it less significant than it can be. So I wanted to bring that up. I love listening to your show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for taking the time to call in and voice your concerns. It is true that with herpes, as with almost any virus or illness that one can get in the course of a lifetime, there are always rare cases where it can be quite serious. There are a small handful of people for which herpes, for this reason, or some other reason can end up being quite serious. So we don't mean to imply that it's never harmful in any way. Simply to say that for most people, herpes is generally of the garter snake variety. It is for most people, by and large, generally harmless. There are some cases where it is serious, and as you've pointed out, that it actually can develop into something quite serious. What we were aiming to do with the episode was to show, for most people on average, what the danger of herpes and some of the other STIs that we were discussing were. And as you yourself pointed out, while there can be very serious complications, the number of people that experience those are very small, 1 in 10,000. That is, by the way, about the same as your odds of dying in a plane crash. And we do point out that the stigma associated with herpes is far disproportionate to the actual reality of living with herpes for most people. And I was happy to hear that you acknowledged that as well, that yes, the stigma is horribly, dramatically disproportionate to the actual life experience of someone with HSV. And I think that about wraps it up for today's show. I want to thank Kevin again for joining us on the show. I want to thank you for listening and for supporting our free resource, which has helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to polyamory. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, you can call 802-505-POLY, or you can email polyweekly@gmail.com. If you want to book us to speak at your event, or perhaps give one of our popular courses to your group, perhaps even through Skype or Google Hangouts, email lustyguy@polyweekly.com to get that booked and get all the details on that. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.